Well, good afternoon. My name is Ali Colon, and I'm the Knight Professor of Media Ethics at Washington Lee University. I want to welcome you to the keynote address here at Washington Lee. It's the 61st one that we've had. And before I introduce this evening's distinguished speaker, Vivian Schiller, who will come up here soon, who's an independent media consultant and has a very extensive background in media, I want to honor Knight Professor Emeritus Louis Hodges. Professor Hodges died last month at 83. This is his picture here. After 43 years of teaching religion and ethics at Washington Lee University. His contributions will continue here because of all the work that he has done. He's the one who founded a program back in '75 called the Society and the Professions Program, in which he brought undergraduates in business, journalism, law, and medicine to study applied ethics. Out of that, he started an annual institute, actually a two-day institute, that brought professionals together to talk with students about the cases that they had. That became the basis for the institute that I now lead, which takes place in the fall and in the winter for 2 days and is taking place right now. Without Professor Hodges' foresight, scholarship, and ethical eye to apply it, we would not be here today. So I, Washington and Lee, and the Department of Journalism and Mass Communications owe him a debt of gratitude for imprinting the concept of ethics in ways that matter to our profession. And his wife, Helen Hodges, is here as well, and I'm grateful that she has the opportunity to attend with us. Okay, so now I want to recognize and thank the professionals who've been gracious enough to join us for this weekend's seminar as fellows. I'd like the fellows to please stand as I introduce you and remain standing until all of you have been named. Please hold your applause until everyone has been recognized. First, Byron Akihito. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner and now editor-in-chief of Third Certainty. Lynn Adrien, director in DC, graduate program, broadcast and digital journalism, Syracuse University, and formerly a senior producer for ABC News. Evelyn Hsu, executive director of the Maynard Institute for Journalism Education, who has been a Poynter Institute faculty member and also worked at the Washington Post. So somehow I am missing the sheet that has the rest of my fellows. I don't know how that happened, except that it's not in the right order and it got moved. All right, no problem. So after that, that's okay. I've got others. I've got Craig Masuda, who used to work for the LA Times, now does communication consulting with Rand Corporation and others in the medical field. I have Kenny Irby, who's involved with intervention director right now in the community of St. Petersburg, Florida, and worked with me for many years at the Poynter Institute in St. Petersburg, Florida. And Diane Powell, who's right there in the back, who is here, is a communications consultant, has had a career with NBC News, and has told us that she had the honor and I think the temerity to actually try to get publicity for a show that nobody thought was going to succeed, Saturday Night Live. So please give a hand to all of them. All right. No, you have to stand now for the rest of the speech, please, because I want everybody to pay attention. All right, that's good. So, I also want to acknowledge the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which is underwriting the Ethics Institute and the seminars and the lecture that's going on this afternoon. Now I'll introduce Vivian Schiller. Vivian Schiller's career might be seen as a homage to the value of a liberal arts education. Like most liberal arts education, it involves some serendipity. Her serendipitous saga began when she was a university student and had to focus on time, more specifically, a specific hour. Ms. Schiller had to fulfill a language requirement, something all of you students are familiar with. Now, most of those language classes began early in the morning or late in the afternoon. So she thought very logically about this and chose a Russian class because it began at noon. Liberal arts thinking at its best. The serendipitous decision led her to majoring in Russian, that led to a master's in Russian, then to leading tours to Russia. And when Ted Turner turned his attention to the Cold War at that time with Russia and wanted a documentary, Ms. Schiller joined him. She says he needed a fixer and a flunky. Everything she learned about broadcasting at Turner Broadcasting, she learned on the job. She produced news documentaries and long-form videos for CNN and the Discovery Times channel. During her 14 years at Turner, Ms. Schiller discovered a passion for journalism and left the entertainment side. Then she was recruited to launch a cable channel for the New York Times. She went to the New York Times to help with video for its online site. This move enabled her to become general manager of NewYorkTimes.com, introducing its first mobile offering. Her work at the NewYorkTimes.com vaulted her to the position of president and CEO of NPR, where she helped increase its digital presence. She left NPR for NBCNews.com. And then when Twitter decided it wanted to create the position of chair of global news, it offered the chair to Ms. Schiller. A year later, she became an independent executive, media executive. One of her positions involves being the executive editor in residence at Weber Shandwick, which is a global communications and engagement firm. So now she's on the other side, helping Weber Shandwick and its clients address media change and engage audiences. So now you know what a liberal arts approach can yield. And tonight, Ms. Schiller will talk to us about the ethics and the new media landscape that awaits us. Her firsthand experience will inform us about the media ethics from the inside and the outside. Please welcome Vivian Schiller.
Very dramatic. Thanks, Ollie. First of all, I'm really, really happy to be here. I just spent an afternoon with a bunch of the students here. We had a fantastic conversation about media and ethics, and it's just so exciting for me as somebody that's been in media for so long to see the kind of passion and focus and smarts that the next generation of journalists and communications executives are bringing. So thank you. I'm really, really happy to be here. As Ollie mentioned, I spent, after I did my Russian thing, I spent the first part of my career, I was very luckily with some of the best news organizations in the world, really. New York Times and CNN and NPR and NBC News. But after 20 years of working with, I would characterize as publishing companies in the broadest sense, they publish news on whatever the platform might be, I decided I wanted to take a chance. And so, as you heard, I joined Twitter because I wanted to see what the world looked like from inside of a tech company. And then most recently, I've signed on with the global communications firm Weber Shandwick as with the very fancy title that I'm not quite sure what it means, but it certainly sounds impressive, which is executive editor in residence. It's a part-time role. I'm doing other things too, but for the first time, I get to look at media from the point of view of the marketer. And so it's these three sister industries, publishing, marketing, and technology, that I want to talk about today. They are absolutely distinct practices. They have very, very different goals. And yet each of them is now not only transforming, but converging. And with that convergence, they are forever altering what we, consumers, audiences, users, customers, whatever your point of view, what we know and what we believe. And if you're wondering what anything I just talked about has to do with ethics, the answer is everything. So before we talk about what's happening now, I think it's important to remind ourselves about how we got here. So there's a lot of people, and I sometimes fall prey to this, but mostly not, who like to wax poetic about the good old days. Now, I actually don't believe in media, and I actually don't agree with this, that the old model of media was better, no matter, by any measure, really, than what we have today. But one thing I think is certain is that it was a lot clearer when it comes to the roles of publishers, marketers, and technology. And it went something like this. Marketers, who were trying to reach customers bought ads, and or they tried to entice journalists to write about those products and services that they had to offer. So success or failure for marketers in terms of reaching their customers or potential customers was really established on the concept of being a successful brand. It was all about the brand. News organizations were the gatekeepers. They ran the ads that those companies bought, and if a pitch was compelling enough, a reporter might cover the product or service that the company had to offer for stories in their publication. But for news organizations, the coin of the realm, what news organizations had to offer was content. Now, it wasn't called content then. It was called articles and television and all those kind of things. But we know it today as content, and even though it's an imperfect word, it's a good shorthand. Technology was expensive. The broadcast tower, the printing press, those created the scarcity that kept publishers in business and frankly kept everybody out. The customers, the consumers, the audiences, they got everything in a tidy package, whether it was a newspaper delivered to your doorstep or the thing known as the 6 o'clock news or the 6:30 news or all things considered on your local NPR station. It was a bundle of news content with the more advertising-friendly stuff, things like food and business that advertisers want to be next to, cross-subsidizing the stuff that advertisers didn't want to be next to, like war coverage, which of course are things that as news organizations we felt that the audiences needed to know. And even when the web came along, the cost of entry, of course, got incredibly cheaper. It still didn't fundamentally change the notion of news as a destination. So it all kind of worked, or it worked well enough. But then two things happened. First, Steve Jobs came back from corporate exile, came back to Apple from corporate exile, and then Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of Harvard. And soon, everything turned upside down. And soon, news organizations became not just about content, but about being a brand. And marketers were not just concerned about being a brand, they had to generate content. And this is where it gets all topsy-turvy. Now, why did that happen? That happened because that bundle, that neat little package, the newspaper, the 6 o'clock news, all things considered, fell apart. In just a few short years, thanks to mobile devices, led by the iPhone, which then, of course, generated the Android and all the kind of devices that you're all probably looking at right now instead of paying attention to me. Those devices, and then Facebook, which of course managed to capitalize after a false start being mostly web only on mobile and help perpetuate mobile, they profoundly changed the way that we consume news. So today, most Americans, as you probably know, discover news in a feed. A feed, it's called the news feed on Facebook, it's called the timeline on Twitter. It's all got different kinds of names, but it's a lineup of stuff that you scroll through, mixing everything together, and that's how you get your news. Over 80% of Americans today are on Facebook, and over 40% of them consider Facebook a source of news. This is according to a Pew study, which is now a year old, is probably higher now. For millennials, that number is even higher. But now comes the real step function. All that crazy change, that ain't nothing to what's going to happen in terms of platforms and news organizations and platforms. Because what's going to happen now is that not only will you be discovering news on Facebook, but more and more you will be consuming news on Facebook. There will be no need to click away from the platform to read a story or watch a video. There will be no reason to leave Facebook, ever. The platforms, so how did this happen and what am I talking about? The platforms realized that something very savvy. They can keep users on their sites by offering things that consumers want right there, then and there, in the feed, and in a way that is a much better experience. So instead of lots of links on Facebook, it used to be on Facebook you would see a headline and then you'd see a link, and you'd click out to those links, to go to a news destination. And frankly, because of that dynamic, that gave birth to very successful digital news organizations like Upworthy and BuzzFeed in particular. So it used to be that you'd click on a link and you would click off of Facebook and you would go consume the news to the news organization that knew how to position things well on Facebook. But that is now changing. This change started about 15 months ago with Snapchat Stories, something that certainly anybody here that is under the age of 25 knows very, very well. So Snapchat Stories, their breakthrough was, besides just the original concept of the snap, we can allow you to create and we can bundle pieces of information into a story. And they've even hired journalists to create these stories on Snapchat to great, great success. So no need to click off at Facebook. On Snapchat, you don't click anywhere. You stay on the platform. You don't need to. You're getting your news on Snapchat. Snapchat Stories begat Facebook Instant Articles. Facebook Instant Articles is either a brilliant or a devious or both product, depending on your point of view. Facebook Instant Articles is if you click on a link in your Facebook feed, rather than it taking you off to the Washington Post or the CNN or New York Times or wherever, it just opens that story right in your feed. Again, no need to leave Facebook ever. And the reason that Instant Articles is so appealing is because if you own a mobile device, which all of you do, and you own a smartphone, which probably everybody in this room does, you click on a story on Facebook, it takes you somewhere else, and you wait for what feels like an eternity. Now, most cases, it's only 5 to 7 seconds, but for all of us, that may as well be an eternity. If you click on Instant Articles, boom, the article's right there. So why would a news organization want to give their content to Instant Articles, you might ask? Because if they give the content to Facebook Instant Articles, nobody's going to click over to their site. Again, what Facebook has promised is, first of all, your users, your readers, will get that story much faster. They won't have that frustration factor of clicking away. And I'm speaking now as Facebook, we're going to give you, publisher, 100% of the revenue that you generate on Instant Articles. Instant Articles started with just being available to a few publishers. It's now, I think, it's starting in 2 weeks, being rolled out to everyone. Again, Instant Articles, no need to leave Facebook. Instant Articles begat Apple News. If you upgraded to iOS, where are we now, 9? In September, you got something called Apple News. Again, publishers feeding their stories into the Apple News app. You can read everything there, consume it there. No need to leave the feed ever. That then begat Twitter Moments, which is Twitter's, depending on who you talk to, either successful or not successful attempt to do the same thing, which is we're going to bundle all these tweets into a story. No need to click away. Stay right here. You'll be able to get everything you want right here on Twitter. Each of these moves is intended to keep you on the platform and to never leave. And it is in the process of destroying the concept of news destinations. In Facebook, in this stream environment, that means that if you are a publisher, if you are the New York Times or your CNN or your BuzzFeed, whoever you are, you're going to have your stuff in a feed all intermingled with everybody. A New York Times article is going to be next to a TMZ article, is going to be next to a Breitbart article. So if you're a publisher with a story on Instant Articles, how do you stand out? How do you signal, we're the New York Times, we stand for something? How do you attract loyal readers? How do you make sure the next generation of people who may never know anything that they read other than outside of these feeds to know the difference, again, between a New York Times and a TMZ or what have you? And how do you get paying advertisers? If you're a publisher, therefore, you can't just be about content, you have to be about brand, just like the marketers. Meantime, on the other side of the fence, the marketers are facing their own crisis. Their customer base, too, has moved to mobile. It's the same customer base, that we're talking about. But those ads that used to be the way to reach customers, those now become mobile ads. And I don't know about you, but to me, mobile ads are a terrible, terrible experience. those tiny little banners that show up at the top, or worse, an interstitial that's interrupting what you're trying to do. It's no coincidence that the X is microscopic, and if you try to do it, it clicks you through to the ad. Mobile ads are terrible. Not only that, they're slowing down your mobile device. They load really slowly, which is why now, according to some reports, 1 in 5 people using mobile devices, particularly on Apple, which has enabled this, are using ad blockers. And again, whatever statistic I give you for the general population, you can count on it being double for millennials. So if you're a brand, a marketer, what do? You can't, these mobile ads are useless to you. You have to do the same thing that the publisher's doing. You need to find your way into the stream. How? Not with ads. I mean, there are some ads in stream, not with ads, but with stories. So now marketers need to be not just about brands, but about content. We've got this switching of sides. Everybody is content and brand. So these bits and pieces in the stream of news and marketing messages are all mixed up, not just with each other, but with your sister's baby pictures, and with the latest meme, and with the video of Pizza Rat, and with all manner of screeds, either for or against Donald Trump, depending on what your social graph is. So everyone fits into those same boxes. Everyone is fighting for attention. They're all taking on the same form factor. It is a morass. Brands, content, brands, all looking very much alike. And if this sounds like an ethical swampland, well, yes, it could be, but it doesn't have to be. I'm optimistic. I'm an optimistic person by nature. So I believe that actually ethics is the key to standing out for both publishers and for marketers. So let me explain a little bit about what I mean by that. So I want to quote, so for those of you who in the room, how many people have seen Spotlight? Really just so basically everybody in the room. Incredibly inspirational, of course, the Oscar winner. So Marty Baron, played by, what's the actor's name? Liev Schreiber. So the Liev Schreiber character is a really wonderful real-life guy named Marty Baron, who is extraordinary. He was the editor-in-chief. I know him well. He's a wonderful person. He was the editor-in-chief of the Boston Globe. He then is now the editor-in-chief of Washington Post. Anyway, in a speech that he gave last year, he described what brand means to him. Now, you have to understand that sort of old-school journalists, I'm kind of old school and new school at the same time, hate the word brand. It sounds like sort of tainted and ugly and like not journalistic and sort of beneath us, that kind of thing. So Marty says, I don't mind the word brand, but I'm going to tell you what brand means to me. And his quote is, "It is our soul, it is our spirit, and it is our identity. It's what defines us. It's what sets us apart. It is ultimately our compass." And if that doesn't sound like ethics to you, then you need to go back to your ethics classes, because that is, to me, the very definition of ethics. Now, on the other side, again, going back now to the marketers, there's a quote that I like from my boss at Weber Shandwick. He is not a journalist. He does not pretend to be. He's a marketer, strategic communications guy through and through. His name's Chris Perry. He's a chief digital officer there. And he talks about what content means for marketers. So just like brands is something that is, that journalists are trying to get their heads around, marketers are trying to get their heads around what content means, other than being in a commercial. So what he says to marketers is, quote, "Don't think about an advertising dilemma to solve. Figure out how you earn attention and engagement by doing things that create real value." Value. If I'm a marketer and I'm looking at, and I am now, both a marketer and a journalist, that sounds very much like ethics to me. So ethics is the key to both. It is a way to stand out. It is a way to differentiate yourself. It is not a burden to maintain ethics in everything that you do. It is actually a point of differentiation. It is an advantage in the struggle to stand out. Now, this brave new world of streams is fraught with implications that we're only just beginning to understand. And this isn't going to be easy. There are going to be many pitfalls, and we see them all the time. But there's a few things that I'm watching, I want to mention, that we should all be watching, and maybe we can talk a little bit more of them in the Q&A if you're interested. But there's sort of a few areas where there's ethical peril and also, I would say, ethical opportunity, or opportunity, again, both for brands and content, for news organizations and journalists. So one is that streams, because of the nature of what Facebook is and what Twitter is and what SMS is and what all of these kind of communication platforms are, have caused people to, and I think to the good, to be more casual in their communication. Voice matters when it comes to these platforms. Voice and really a point of view, an identity. And so if you're a news organization that has built itself and has built its reputation on impartiality and journalistic values, on notions of objectivity, what do you do? How do you think about having a voice, having an attitude, having a point of view in a stream? Now, there have been so many, we're watching this play out, and there's, frankly, some what I think are tragic incidents. I have seen really extraordinary journalists lose their jobs and go down because of something that they tweeted, forgetting that when you're tweeting, you're never off the clock. What you tweet on a Saturday night is just as important as what you're tweeting on a Monday afternoon. And so there have been plenty of examples, I'm sure you know them, of journalists losing their job, not for saying things like, hey, I'm partying with my friends. That's fine, everybody accepts that, but saying things that would not pass muster if they were to say it, if they were to write it in their newspaper or say it on the air. And we're seeing, it's funny, we're seeing these kind of issues kind of blow back in a way to legacy media. So for instance, I don't know if you've all just followed the controversy just in the last couple of days about this New York Times story about Bernie Sanders' record as a legislator. And they wrote the story, and it seemed to and it was perceived to be so favorable to Bernie Sanders that the Sanders campaign actually tweeted it out and saying, see, the New York Times basically is saying I'm a good guy, and it's akin to an endorsement. But what happened was, and I encourage you to read the two articles, read what's been written, and read the public editor's comments about it, is then over the course of a number of hours, they made some changes because it's a digital media, right? It's not immutable like print. And according to the opinion of many, including the public editor of the New York Times, they changed the tone such, even if they didn't change the facts, that what was sort of tilted as a positive seemed to be tilted as a negative. This has caused a firestorm. So these kind of things are sort of blowing back from, I think, the nature of the casual way that we use social media back into legacy media. There was another recent controversy. Again, these are examples from just the last week. At my old shop, well, New York Times is my old shop, and NPR is my old shop, with Cokie Roberts, who, in her role as a commentator, delivered a piece of radio that was negative about Donald Trump. And, she used to be a journalist, now she's in a commentator. Do people really understand the difference? All these kinds of things are getting mixed up. So again, issue number one, what is casual voice? What is point of view? What is tone? What does voice mean when you're a journalist? Second set of categories, streams demand incremental reporting. So when there was no digital media, when there was no Twitter, you found out the news at 6 o'clock if you had a television, and then again at 11 o'clock, or the next morning when you read your newspaper. Now, obviously, there is no such thing as holding stories. And when news is breaking, or even when it's not breaking, news organizations have an obligation, I would submit, to report what they know when they know it. But often, what they know at the start is wrong. How do you, and again, I'm posing this as a question, I don't have the answers to any of these things. How do you as a news organization say, here's what we know now, here's what we're seeing, here's what this person is saying, particularly when it's in 140 characters, so that you are not being alarmist, you're not misleading the audience, and then when you're ready to correct it, how do you do that when we're in a stream that just goes, at the speed of sound? Although, well, we can talk about this later. Twitter's now introduced an algorithm to everybody, which changes everything, and that's the story for another speech. The third thing is streams, and here I will say, particularly Twitter, I would say the Twitter that existed before March 18th, 2016, the day that the algorithm was introduced, which happens to be today, which may go down in history as either a bright day or a dark day, depending on your point of view. Streams are a great way for news gathering. When I was at Twitter, one of the things that I
sort of preached to news organizations was, I said, look, you can tweet your stories. Yes, we want, I said, look, I work for Twitter. Of course I want you to tweet your stories. I want you to tweet links to your stories. I want you to share everything you know on Twitter. But Twitter is also an extraordinarily valuable source of news. It is with 500 million tweets a day, it is one of the greatest news tip services ever known to man. No matter what's happening anywhere in the world, if news breaks, there's somebody there that's tweeting. This is and now there's technology that can overlay all of those tweets to really sort of extract the signal from the noise. It's an amazing, amazing tool for news gathering, but it also brings its own set of ethical values. Do you publish somebody's tweet? Are you putting them in danger? When you reach out to somebody via Twitter who happens to be an event, do you say, what else are you seeing? Does that encourage the person to stay on the scene, in a dangerous place? If somebody's in a hostage situation, in a school shooting on lockdown, and they're tweeting or they're sending out a Facebook saying, here's what I'm seeing, if you're CNN, do you read that? Are you putting that kid at risk? I mean, it's all of this just is crazy fraught with all kinds of implications.
Fourth thing that I'm watching is, native content, branded content, content marketing. It goes by every other name, many, many names. And it is what I talked about earlier, which is brands telling stories. Now, I think it's great that brands tell stories. And I think it's great that news organizations, whether it's T-Brand Studios at the New York Times or the many ones, I mean, BuzzFeed is very good at this, have gotten into the business as a way to make money, to displace a lot of the revenue that they've lost because of the sinking advertising market, that they've found new revenue streams by saying, look, we're storytellers, come to us, brand, and we will package a story up for you because we know how to tell stories. That's all great. I got no issue with that whatsoever. But some news organizations and some brands, not the ones that I work with, but some brands, count on just a little bit of confusion with those stories going out, so that the reader may or may not know, is this actually a piece of news content or is this a piece of marketing? Now, the good ones brand that very carefully, but once you go into the stream, it gets even more confusing. There is no universal sort of, good housekeeping seal of approval, to use a really, really old term that most of you probably don't even know what I mean. Some kind of stamp that says, hey, world, this is great content. We want you to read it, but it is paid for and it's been reviewed by an advertiser. So read it, but just know what their point of view is. So this is a whole other set of issues I'm watching. For brands, it's the same thing. How do you tell stories while being transparent about your authorship? How do brands engage in streams in an authentic way? This is also fraught with sort of interesting ethical dilemmas. And how do they provide that value that Chris Perry was talking about when they're telling stories in the stream? I don't know the answers to any of this. I mean, I have my opinions, but it's all being played out. And as more and more of our readership goes to consuming in stream instead of to the distribution instead of the destination, there's all kinds of things we're going to face that we just don't even know yet. And it's going to be really interesting and I think really exciting to find out. But at the center of all of this is trust. That is, to me, the beating heart, whether you are a marketer or whether you're a news organization, about the way that you enter the world and you communicate with your audience, the user, the customer, the consumer in this world of streams. And I'll quote Marty Barrett again, because he's so quote-worthy. Quote, "No question, trust is our greatest challenge. We are constantly worried about resources, social media, monetization, and all these kinds of things. But all of those pale in comparison to this particular challenge." And that's a news organization. If I'm Unilever or General Motors or Bank of America, I'm thinking about the same thing. How can I keep trust at the center of what I do? Now, I think this is the most exciting time for both journalism and communication since the beginning of human history. There are so many tools at our disposal. There's access to information is accessible to people in unprecedented ways in real time. The means of creating content, sharing information has never been greater. But this constancy of ethics, of maintaining trust, has to be at the center of everything we do. And if your head is spinning about all of the change that's happening all the time, here's a closing couple of words that I want you to consider. Change will never be this slow again. Think about that. So, thank you. With that, I think we can open it up to questions. There are no mics, so just shout it out, and if you're not loud, I'll just repeat the question for the purposes of the video.
Feel free, I've got my sheets now.
And for you guys, it's not questions. You can just make comments because you're live this.
When you're explaining Facebook feed, why are they giving it free? Can you explain the back end of that model?
Facebook what?
You said Facebook is encouraging people to supply their...
To instant articles. Oh, okay, yeah. It's very why are they giving so Facebook instant articles. So the question is, why is I think what you're asking is, why is Facebook letting the publishers keep all the revenue on their site? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they're encouraging people to put the content in
Right.
their platform.
So the reason Facebook is created instant articles, and by the way, for video there is no, it's the Facebook player. I mean, I should mention that, everything is going towards video now anyway, but okay, for the purposes of articles, for this purpose, Facebook created instant articles. They will tell you they created it because it's a better user experience, because people complain about the lag when you click on a link on your cell phone, how long it takes. I have to wait 7 seconds. Oh my God, for the story to load. And you know what? It is a better experience. I have to say, when I see that little lightning bolt on Facebook, this is just me talking, not as a professional. I'm much more likely to click because it's there. I mean, it's not just that it loads instantly, it's right there. So, whereas I hesitate, it's like, am I sure I want to read this? Is it worth my 7-second investment? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but this is the way our minds work now. So they made a better user experience. But what's in it for them is they're keeping people on the site. Because if I click over, if they send me with a link over to BuzzFeed or the New York Times, I might read the article there, something else will catch my eye, and I might not come back. Facebook wants to keep you on their site. That's their business imperative. And they want to keep you on their site because they have the ability not only to make money off of you, but they then get to keep your data. They know everything about, and I'm not putting a value judgment on this. I'm just saying that when you stay on the site, Facebook will now know. It used to be that once you click off Facebook, they lose track of you. They don't know how long you stayed on that other place and where you went afterwards. This way, Facebook knows your behavior and can tweak its algorithm and, serve you, the user, and serve themselves better. Why do this isn't the question you asked, but it's worth pointing out. Why do news organizations, why are they willingly agreeing to publish their full content on Facebook, instead of having the user come back to their site? They're doing it for two reasons. One, because that's where the audience is. There are 1.5 billion people on Facebook. There is no news organization in the world that has even a fraction of that. So that is where the audience is, and particularly that is where the younger audience is. And here's the kicker, which I think is an absolutely brilliant move on Facebook's part. Facebook said, publisher, if you publish your content to Facebook Instant Articles, you can sell ads on that content and you can keep 100%. We're not going to take one dime of it. And publishers were stunned by this. And, I was surprised. I'm like, isn't this a business opportunity you're missing? And what was explained to me by somebody that works there is, you know what? The money that we make, we need news organizations. We need news articles. We need quality news because that's what gets people coming back again and again and again. Your sister's baby pictures, you really don't want to check 12 times a day for that picture. You've seen it. You're kind of done for the day. You might be done for the week. News, you want to know what's going on. Platforms know that news is what gets people to come back. So they willingly let what for Facebook is a de minimis amount of revenue, they let that go back to the publishers in order to encourage the publishers to publish to instant articles and to keep publishers beholden to Facebook. It's brilliant. I mean, in theory, everybody wins, although many news organizations are worried that this, as I've pointed out, the end of loyalty to brands as they know it. Because, sorry, it's just long-winded, but it's a really important point. If you're a brand, if you're when you're a New York Times on Facebook, you can't control your environment.
There's no such thing as what's the story that goes in the upper right. This whole concept of like placing stories, it's gone.
Isn't this a repeat of what happened with Google? And I mean, news organizations essentially gave content free to the search engine.
But they did, because Google, you click back to the article. There might be a little abstract, but you got to click back. So Google, the funny thing is Google used to be considered evil to many publishers now. They're like, oh, we love Google. They send us traffic. You know, Facebook, they want to keep us there.
Somebody else with a question? Yes.
I have a question. So for these news organizations, these news stories, is the frequency and the whose newsfeed they're showing up in essentially figured out by algorithms? And I'm wondering what the danger is in it being not a person giving a well-rounded selection of news as you'd get in a newspaper if you're picking up something tangible, but the process of it being computer chosen on which articles are most popular. I'm thinking about, I think it was when the Paris shootings happened, and then a few days later there was a bombing in a much smaller city. Does anyone remember this? And people, like, weeks later there was a lot of controversy because that wasn't like, there was anger at the media because no one wrote about that when in fact it had been, but it hadn't been shared as much, so it wasn't generating. So my question is, I guess to get back to the point, do you think there's a danger in this new, all this technological and algorithm and being computers and not people choosing news, and the fact that it's going to get streamlined and there's going to be no range of stories?
So the algorithm gives rise to two sets of issues that has been widely discussed. One is the concept of filter bubble, right, which isn't specifically what you're talking about, which is, if all my friends think like I do, that's who I'm friends on Facebook, the algorithm is going to feed me stories that they thinks I'm going to like, and I'm not going to see alternative points of view. And the other is, a story, Paris was such a dominant story, and I think, what was the bombing? It was at Beirut, thank you. But Beirut didn't get as much coverage. Well, part of the issue too is Facebook set up this whole thing of like where you could mark I'm safe, and they didn't do it for Beirut. And it was more complicated than just what you're talking about, but I agree that that's an issue. Look, Facebook will tell you that the algorithm, they don't create the algorithm in a vacuum. Facebook will tell you that they're creating the algorithm is designed in a way that based on what you like, what you comment on, who you follow, it's going to feed you what it thinks you want. And that, the more input you put into it, the better it's going to be. So, but, it's still an algorithm. And, the interesting thing is everything is going towards algorithm. In just the last week, I mean, it's amazing. We can have a conversation like this, and I can use examples exclusively from the last week. In just the last week, the only two remaining reverse chronological feed of news that was pure feed have both introduced algorithms, Instagram and now Twitter. So Twitter, if you remember, introduced about a month ago, they said, we're going to introduce an algorithm to give you the stories, the tweets we think you want, but it's opt-in. So if you don't want to opt in, fine. And then boom, last night, they turned it on to everyone. And I spent a couple of hours this morning on Twitter answering tweets to people, giving them instructions on where to find the place to turn it off. You can, it's hard to find. And if you're used to Twitter and you love Twitter, and what you love about Twitter is that it's in real time, take a look at your feed today. You're going to be really confused because the timestamps are all over the place. So, this notion of sort of the pure feed, unless you go in and you jerry rig your feeds, is leading rise to exactly what you're talking about. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's what's happening. I don't know what the repercussions are.
Down here.
So it seems like a lot of journalists and generally people who operate on social media like Twitter conduct a lot of important independent research and can come up with a lot of really groundbreaking stuff that will be sort of found by sort of monolithic content appropriators like BuzzFeed, who will then have this underneath their header, attract all of these millions of hits, and then basically it sort of seems like they were the ones who came up with this, regardless of like maybe an HT at the bottom of the page. Do you think that that is damaging for young professionals going forward into fields like journalism?
So the question for posterity is about so-called news organizations or news organizations that generate a lot of stories based on what's trending, essentially. And there's a lot of words for these. They're called hot takes, and they're basically rewrites of what's trending on social media and what everybody's talking about. Some of it can be frivolous stuff like Pizza Rat, and some of it can be quite serious things like what people are talking about from whatever the last night's debate. But it's not. There's what you're talking about. There's no original reporting. There's nobody picking up the phone, checking sources. They're just quickly written, summaries of what other. It's talking about what other people are talking about. Now, is that journalism? Not in the way that I think about journalism. But, I tend to think that there's no content that's inherently bad. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what? It's popular. It's popular because it's enjoyable to read. And you know what? I click on some of that stuff. I like to read it. It's interesting to me. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not journalism. It's content. So, but like I said, I don't, I tend not to want to pass judgment on it because, hey, look, some people want to hear all about, the latest Kardashian news. That's fine. I'm not interested. But you know what? I'm not interested in Kardashians, but, I kind of am interested in other celebrities. I click on that stuff. I can't think of one right now, but I know there are.
You said that news is kind of incremental now because of the digital age. What do you think then of something like the Skim, which is like a daily email that's sent out to people, but it's still not the 6 o'clock news. It's kind of somewhere in the middle because it's still digital technically.
Actually, email is such an interesting platform because in some ways it's so old-fashioned, and for the college students in the room, I mean, do you really, when your parents, sorry, there's a little bitterness in this because my children are college students, like, you don't respond to emails, right? You respond to texts, but you don't respond to emails. My 2 college-age students do not respond to emails. It's really, really annoying. And yet, this so-called sort of dying platform is incredibly powerful for news. So the Skim is a great example because that's a product that was created exclusively for email. But a lot of other news, I subscribe to like 8 emails, and I would subscribe to more, but I wake up in the morning and I'm like, it's too much. But, Quartz has Quartz in general is just this amazingly cutting edge. What they've done with their email, they really sort of reinvented, I think, the genre of the news email. And they're now trying to reinvent, sorry, I'm going off a little bit of a tangent, but if you haven't downloaded Quartz's mobile app, so do you guys know Quartz? It's, it's Quartz. On the web. It's qz.com, but it's an app, and it's a media property, journalistic, quite serious media property, digital only, owned by The Atlantic, and it covers business news, but business in a very broad sense. It's not just sort of high finance. So they're really great. They really do a brilliant newsletter, and they just reinvented. They didn't have a mobile app for a long time, and they finally said, okay, we're launching a mobile app. And, because I'm a perpetual student of these things, I downloaded their mobile app and I expected some variation what everybody else's news mobile app looks like. Because let's face it, they all have certain it is nothing like you've ever seen. And I'm not going to do it justice, but download it and try it. It is a chat bot. So you guys know what a chat bot is? So a chatbot, you students should know what chat. So it mimics a messaging app. It is in the format of messaging, but it's a chatbot. So it is a bot. It is automated, and it says, and it speaks in a conversational voice to you, and it says, with the bubble, just like in any messaging service, hey, here's some headlines for you today. What happened today? I don't know. I've been in a news bubble. So today this happened. So we want to let you know. Do you want to know more? And then you go, sure. And they go, great. Here's some more. Bing, 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 bing. Are you done? No. Okay, here's more about that. Or yes. Okay, here's another thing. What do you think about this? And it's all in this very responsive format. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. And whether it'll succeed, I don't know. But I love how they're sort of reinventing
the medium, which gets back to email, which again, I think is really powerful because it gives you that kind of summary. It allows you to click off. But I still think that Facebook's going to win.
Get somebody back here.
I was just wondering if the spotlight story could have been covered now. Can we, because it hinged on waiting. The whole story blew open because Byron, the guy.
Marty Barron, yep.
Yeah, made them wait, and Robbie made them wait.
Right.
Could that happen though?
Right. I think so. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, there are. Yes, absolutely. Again, I'm an optimist, and I'm a believer that there's a lot of hand-wringers saying journalism is ruined. It's not. There's just more stuff. So it feels like in this sort of morass of stuff, it's easy to think that and a lot of that stuff is not high quality. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that those same journalistic entities are still there and doing really good work. And so the Washington Post, where Marty Barron is, and the Boston Globe, which is a fine newspaper, or the New York Times, or the Wall Street Journal, they have enterprise reporters who do work on stories for months and years. And does it make a lot of money? No. But again, as news organizations think about their brand, that brand, they now think about how they roll those stories out. It's not just about, here it is on the front page, we're done. They now use the best of them use very sophisticated social media strategies to get traction for those stories, to collect more, to amplify them, to get more comments, to find, to extend the story. So yes, I do think, and in fact, there are many examples from the last year of extraordinary stories that have been broken. I mean, even BuzzFeed has been breaking. They now have an investigative journalism unit. They're doing fantastic work. So yes, I do believe that those stories continue to happen today.
This is a little bit different from where we've been, but when you think about trust and brand, and I'm just sort of finishing up House of Cards, the latest season.
Don't. We're only on episode 7. Shh.
Well, I have a question. I hope it won't ruin it for you.
Uh-oh.
There are
When he dies. Oh no, sorry.
There
Yeah.
are news in it. There are a lot of CNN people in it.
Oh yeah, I know.
Filters in it.
Oh, I know.
And,
Yeah.
And there's even a PBS person.
I know.
And this sort of
I hate it.
The brand back and forth. Is that CNN advertising? Is that House of Cards? Is one with CNN? What is that?
Well, there's no money that changes hands for these. First of all, I know that for a fact. The news. Look, I've had this debate with many people many times in my life. The news organization generally think it's all in good fun. Their anchors love it because they, get to be on sets of movies and, it's all over the place. No money changes hands. I really don't like it. I personally don't like it. But there's many people, fine journalists I respect, who think it's okay. It's marketing. But by the way, that's not new. That kind of thing's been around for a really long time. It makes me uncomfortable. It's a lot. I know. Who doesn't want to be on House of Cards? I mean, so, but I don't like it.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. Pick one of the legacy media you worked for, New York Times or CNN.
Don't tell me to pick my favorite.
Pick one. And what would you tell them that they should be doing differently?
Oh, well, I've told them many times. All of them have things they could be doing differently. Over time, each of these companies, each of these news organizations has, of course, evolved. So, when I was at CNN, there was CNN.com, but there was no mobile. I mean, I left CNN in 2002. So, CNN was, I'll just tick through like 15 seconds on each one. CNN was way behind until recently on, they thought, and NBC had the same problem. We do television. Video's a great thing on mobile, right? Video's so popular. We're the original video creators. We do television. We do 24 hours of television. We have all this video. We're just going to chop it up and put it on Facebook. And meanwhile, all these startups that didn't have video ran circles around them because they were creating video that was designed and made for the platform. Finally, at least I can speak for CNN, got with the program, and they're now very heavily investing in digitally native content, including video, and they're not trying to marry it to TV. So they've come around. New York Times is doing some extraordinarily inventive stuff. They've got a big virtual reality studio. NPR has done extraordinary digital work. They have their own set of challenges that again, just from story from the last 2 or 3 days, I don't know, actually yesterday, if you follow these kind of things like I do. So the NPR newsroom put out an edict telling all of the shows, don't say at the end of a story, you can find more about the story, you can find a longer interview on NPR One, which is their mobile app. Or don't say, you can refer to, there's some podcasts out there, but you can't say this specific podcast. And the whole world, or my world, on Twitter, of journalists, went nuts over this, going, what? Why? This is so, why would, it's a service to your audience to say, if you tell the audience, you can find the longer interview, good luck finding it, we're not going to tell you where. Tell them where to find it. Why make them do that work? But the answer is, and this just shows every news organization's own struggle, is because of the stations. So the local stations who, NPR is a member organization. The stations are what supports NPR. They control the board of NPR. The stations don't like NPR telling their local listeners to go to NPR One because the stations want their listeners to go to, WXYZ.org. So I got plenty of advice for everybody. All the time.
Well, go ahead.
Following up a little bit on a sort of a Watergate era question, following the money, what's your take on Michael Wolff's book, Television is the New Television, as far as where most of the money is these days? There's a lot of startups, a lot of noise, but where's the cash?
Yes, I know. And I actually have recently debated this very point with Michael Wolff at an event on stage. Michael Wolff is right and he's wrong. Michael Wolff is right in that that there's just a tremendous amount of money still in television. And it is not dying nearly as, it is declining, but it hasn't fallen off the cliff in the way that people expect. Actually, I think that's actually a problem for television organizations, broadcast television organizations. And I think the fact that they're still making so much money has caused them not to invest in digital and mobile platforms in the way that they should. The newspapers, 10 years ago stared at the abyss and realized we need to get with the program. Television hasn't had that moment yet. So he's right that there's still a lot of money there. But Michael Wolff's point of view is, therefore, forget about digital media. Just forget about it. Don't bother with it. Just stick with television. There's never going to be any money. Just forget it. And that's where I deeply, deeply, deeply disagree. Yes, business models are really fraught right now. There is absolutely no question. But the only way that the business models are going to emerge and sustainable business models are going to happen is if all of the students in this room go into journalism and go into media and go into communications, and they figure out what's going to replace the business models that happened before. So I got nothing wrong with, I love television. I worked in television. I hope that they continue to thrive, but the disruption writing is on the wall, and we can't just stick our head in the sand. We've got to figure out how to follow the money to where the audience is now.
Give her a hand, please.